So as you can see by the title, today's video is going to be about 10 easy skateboarding tricks that you can do on a hip. So if you are just learning how to skate, I do not recommend skating any type of obstacle like this before. And when skating a hip, it's just sort of like skating on flat ground, except in my personal experience, you get a little bit more pop going off a little bank. And you don't have to like turn as much when you're doing 180 and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun, and I guess it still technically counts as skating on an obstacle. So I guess that's cool. You get some cool skater points when you're doing that. But I wanted to do what I think are 10 easy skateboarding tricks on a hip, and I will be only covering normal stance stuff and fakie things. So nollie and switch will be out of the question, mostly because I think just being in nollie and switch and doing tricks in that stance is just, it's more intermediate than it is a beginning thing. So we will be doing some regular stance things and some fakie stuff today on the hip, right there. So like I said, you are going to want to probably have at least a little bit of understanding of some of these tricks before you end up tackling it on a hip, because although it does seem like it's pretty much the same exact trick, and for the most part with some of the tricks it is doing the same thing as it would be on flat ground, just on a little bit of a degreed obstacle, if that makes sense. So the first tricks are going to be the 180s, front side and back side 180. So 180s are, I would say it's kind of a warm-up trick, and when you're doing it, especially on a hip, it makes it even a little bit more of a warm-up. It's kind of like the first thing that I do when I end up skating a hip. Since I'm goofy, I will be going this way, but what I always focus on when I'm doing 180s is that I pop it and I try to land with all my weight on the front. That way I can just revert the backside like this, so it just kind of goes like this. It's kind of weird because it's called a 180, even though you're only doing a 90-degree turn on it, technically. You technically could come in a straight line and end up doing a full 180, but a lot of people when they're skating hips, since you just kind of, you don't have to really try as hard when you're doing rotation tricks, it's, a lot of people revert things. And you'll do it with full cabs, you'll do it with some other tricks too, but with 180s, I try to land with my front foot giving pressure on the board, and the back foot can just revert it a little bit. So yeah, that's all it is. And with frontside 180s, it kind of applies the same way. If you're like me and you don't want to revert it, just because I'm a little bit more scared reverting it frontside than I am backside, I try to do more of a rotation and just land with all four wheels landing at the same time. To each their own. Now the next two tricks are going to be pretty much the same thing as a backside 180 and a frontside 180, except you're going to be approaching it in the fakie stance. I will actually say, along with backside 180s, half cabs is definitely a way that I warm up on hips, and just the way I warm up in general. With being goofy, I approach the hip with my backside, so if you're regular, it will be the same way. And I pay attention to where the crease of the hip is, and I pop right before then, which is pretty much what you're gonna want to do, and you may run into the problem of the tail going over it, and it just kind of flops out, and you miss the pop. That's okay, just try to, in your mind, do like a mind game, and just like when you're approaching the hip and you see that crease of the hip, just pop a little bit beforehand. So when you're first learning it, you can pop it like this, and then land and like pivot it, like that. Or just the more you do it, the more practice you get in it, you can actually just pop it and rotate it fully all the way around, so. Now with frontside half cabs, it's a little bit scarier because this is gonna be the first trick out of the four that I've suggested so far that you're going towards the hip blind side, which means that when you're approaching it, you can't really see what you're going to be doing. What I mean by this is that when you're doing the trick, the obstacle will be behind you like that. Even though you can look straight down and see the obstacle below you, which is what you're going to want to be doing when you're executing the trick, it's a little bit freaky just because you can't see anything that's behind you. So if there's like a little baby puppy behind you, you may hit it, which that's very scary. In my opinion, what you're going to want to do is snap the tail right at the very top of the hip. I know some people approach it more straight on. That way they can just kind of get the snap over with. But for me, I like getting to the top of the hip as much as I can. That way I know I'm fully over the hip. This is something that I'm not as comfortable with skating. I usually don't do frontside tricks when I'm approaching it fakie anyways. But it's something I've been practicing a lot, and it's super fun and satisfying, even though it's only 180. Now the next trick is going to be a pop shove it. I'm only going to be talking about the backside pop shove it and not the frontside one because, one, I will say straight up, I'm not good at frontside shoves. I think I could probably do one if I tried it on the hip, but I don't even remember the last time I did do one on the hip. So I will be talking about backside shove it because that is something that I'm fairly confident in doing and landing every single try. So this is going to be one of the first tricks that it's pretty much doing it the same as when you're on flat ground. There's no little gimmicks that you can do to get away with it, like reverting or anything like that. But my suggestion is when you're skating a hip is to approach the hip in the middle portion of it. The reason for that is because if you go too much towards the top of it, you may land on the top where it flattens out. Backstroke will land on the one side and you'll fling out forward, and that can happen with a lot of tricks when you're doing it. But with back shoves in particular, you will kind of want as much landing as you can, since you will be just landing straight on and you don't want the board to primo or anything like that, and just create more of a dangerous situation than what could normally happen if you approach it at a different angle. So that is just my preference. I like approaching it in the middle rather than going too much towards the top. My other suggestion is just kind of like a trick tip in general, is keeping your shoulders super parallel with the board. If you rotate it, or if you approach the hip with your shoulders outwards like this while the board is still like perpendicular with your body, what will happen is the board may turn sideways like this and you could primo it. I feel like it raises the chances of that happening anyways. But personally, I always try to keep my shoulders parallel as much as they can when I'm about to do the trick, and it keeps the board more centered. It could be a mental thing, I'm not sure, but that's how it works for me. So with pop shove it, keep your shoulders parallel and approach the hip in the middle of the hip, if that makes sense. Just don't go too much towards the top of it. We're moving locations now because I'm already kind of out of things to have the hip in the backdrop, so we're gonna go somewhere else and you guys will kind of be able to see it in the background. Now this next trick, trick number 5, I believe. Trick number 6, backside, 2 180s, 2 180s, shove, 6. Trick 6. This trick is going to be the Fakie Bigspin, and it's going to be, again, the Fakie backside Bigspin, not frontside. As I mentioned a little bit ago, I'm not really good with doing frontside half cab, so I will be setting the tip on the backside Bigspin. So with this trick, it's literally, to me, it's the opposite of doing a backside pop shove it. How I said, I like approaching the middle of the hip. When I'm doing a Fakie Bigspin, I like popping my tail right off the top of it where it like meets pretty much the flat part of the top of the hip. I don't know what it is about that. If I go too much towards the middle, I feel like I miss that snapping thing, which I mentioned when you're learning half cabs and stuff. You may go over the crease of the hip. When I'm doing Fakie Bigspins, I want to just have as much room of my board being on the first part of the hip as much as I can. So I always wait till the very end to snap my tail and rotate the trick. I don't know if there's any type of revert or anything that you can do with a Fakie Bigspin. I personally don't do anything like that. Since you're doing a 180 and the board's gonna be rotating all over the place anyways, you just wanna make sure that you stay over the board as much as you can and not like lean back too far or lean too far forward. Find that perfect medium and pop off the top of the hip, and it should end up rolling away smoothly. You may fall a couple times too, but. All right, so we were on trick number 7, and I think that this trick right here is the scariest out of them all on a hip, mostly because it's super different than doing it on flat ground, and that is the kickflip. So with this trick on a hip, it's more of a commitment thing. You may feel it be a little bit off when you're approaching a hip anyways, and I've heard some people that they like having the hip backside to them when they do kickflips, and for me, I like having the trick front side. When I was filming a Warehouse Wednesday a while ago for Andy Schrock's channel, he asked me, I think I was warming up or something, they asked me to do a kickflip on the hip, and I approached the hip front side, and they called me out on that, and they thought it was a little weird. Not called me out in a bad way, but they were like, why didn't you do it the other way? And I didn't really have a reason. It's just, that was my first instinct to do the trick, was to approach it like that. It could have been because I felt like I was doing it out of a bank or something like that, but I think the only tip that I have for doing this trick on a hip is that I like popping off the very top of it. I feel like when I do that and I just have the right amount of speed, it gives me a little bit more room to land on the hip itself rather than gapping out too far or landing too far towards the top. I don't know, that's just me. Trial and error with you guys, but I think this is definitely the scariest out of the beginner tricks that you can do on a hip. But again, since it is on a hip, it's a little bit cooler than just doing it on flat ground. All right, here's the yellow beam. I don't know why I chose here, but this is where we are. For trick number 8, we are on the full cab. Now this trick, I would even say that this trick is almost as easy as doing a backside 180 or a half cab or something like that on the hip. Mostly because this trick completely relies on, if you're going to be reverting it anyways, this trick completely relies on landing all your pressure on the top of the board, kind of like how I mentioned during the backside and frontside 180. If you'd like to revert that, you're going to want to be super comfortable in just landing with all your pressure on the top of the board. That way you can revert the last part of it. There are 3 steps that I think of when I'm approaching the full cab, and what you're going to want to do is, in my mind, is I'm approaching the hip, and you can do this doing a full 360, or you can do just the kind of the 270 way too. But you're approaching the hip, you wait till your tail gets to the very top, kind of like how I said half cabs or the Fakie Bigspin. You wait till you get to that moment, you snap the tail. You want to make sure as you're rotating, you want to land all your weight on the very top of the other side of the hip, so on the top of the board when you approach the other side of the hip, if that makes sense. And then when that happens, all your other weight has to just shift to the back, that way it can revert the last part of it. Again, this trick is technically, I would say, more advanced. of a flat ground trick in general, but when you take it to the hip, something about it just makes it a lot easier. Again, this is a trick that I sometimes warm up with. Even though it seems like it should be a harder trick, I would say that this is something a beginner could definitely learn. All right, so trick number 9 and trick number 10 are going to be the very top of the beginner tricks. I say this because the first trick, which is going to be the backside flip, it can kind of rely on the whole revert aspect of things. Sometimes I revert it, sometimes I don't. It all depends on how the trick is in the air. But for the backside flip, I usually approach the hip at the medium level. I don't go too low, I don't go too high. Usually I have a lot of times where I do go too high on the hip, and when I pop the backside flip, I land with my top truck covering over the top of the hip, and that kind of ends badly because I can't roll away from it. So if you go towards the middle of it and you pop it, catch it, you can either revert it towards the middle, and you'll notice that your truck is at the very top of the other side of the hip. And that's pretty much all I can say for the backside flip. I know there's not too much information there. I will say that I'm pretty bad at doing it on flat ground, so if you ever play me in skate, I will probably miss that. Sometimes I can land it. I definitely prefer doing backside flips on hips if it's something to do. But it's super easy trick. It's kind of like doing the kickflip, except you just kind of late 180 at the very end. I like it. And trick number 10. Now, like I said, number 9 and number 10 are going to be some of the harder ones of this beginner's list, but it's something, I guess you can listen back to these tricks 1 through 10 and kind of see if you can do them all yourself or check them out as you go along with it, and maybe move on to other things after that. But trick number 10 is going to be the half cab flip. I will say it's the hardest to learn out of everything. I mean, you have to learn how to ride backwards, you have to flip the board. It's not something you can really revert it. But what I will say about this trick is that it's good because I always feel like my weight distribution is right when I'm going over the hip. There's something about it that it doesn't shoot you too far forward or too far back when you're doing it. But this trick also falls into the list of tricks that you want to pop the deck at the very top of the hip. This is something that works for me. If I go too much towards the middle of it, I usually end up missing the snap of the tail, and it kind of ends poorly. But this is definitely one that I think is something a beginner skateboarder could learn if they're learning how to skate a hip anyways, if you've moved on from the flat ground aspect of learning things and want to take it to an obstacle. A hip is definitely a good go-to for that. Some people get a little bit scared of popping down gaps or stairs or something like that when they're trying to do tricks, and I feel like the hip is a good substitute for people who don't want to usually take it down obstacles, like me, for example. I'm not really good at skating stairs. I enjoy skating hips a lot, and it's kind of an excuse, even though it's still kind of flat ground, it's still kind of an excuse as an obstacle to skate. But that is it, trick number 10, half cab flip. Now I know there are a ton of tutorial videos out there for different obstacles that are kind of blooming right now on YouTube. There's easy flat ground tricks, there's intermediate flat ground tricks, and I thought the hip was a good thing to cover because it's not something that's too much different than skating flat ground, but it still counts as an obstacle, like I've said many times in this video. Pretty much it's fun to skate, and I wanted to cover this because it's something that I skate a lot. That being said, if you guys would like to see another video like this that I do, I can try to put in my 2 cents of something like that, but again, the hip is just something that I feel comfortable skating, that I have a lot of tricks on. So if you'd like to see something a little bit more intermediate, I could try doing that too, even though I probably couldn't end up capturing 10 intermediate tricks and explaining them fully. But these are my opinions and how I feel about doing some tricks on the hip, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. This was my tripod that you guys were sitting on during that time. But I'll see you guys with another video shortly. Definitely some more skateboarding things that will be happening because I've been doing that on this channel since I started it. So I think I can do a chair flip without it breaking. I didn't get it high enough. I give up, I don't want to break it. Goodbye.